Lakeland Currents, your public affairs program for north central Minnesota. Production funding for Lakeland Currents is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org. Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is sponsored by Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Online at nisswatax.com.
Hello again. I'm Jason Edens, your host of Lakeland Currents. Thanks for joining the conversation, and thanks for your ongoing support of Lakeland Public TV. Friends, I'm really excited about our next conversation today. Inspired by the legislative legend Gordon Rosenmeier, the eponymous Rosenmeier Forum has been catalyzing civic discourse through central and north central Minnesota for years. Through a thoughtfully curated speaker series and debate series, the Rosenmeier Forum has become an institution challenging us to think deeply about the pressing political matters of our time. Here to help us learn more about Gordon Rosenmeier and the forum itself are former state representative Steve Wenzel and renowned musician, community organizer, and Rosenmeier Center board member Laura Radicke. Steve and Laura, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you.
Yes, glad to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation for this very special program, Jason.
Absolutely, Steve. I'm sorry you couldn't join us, but we do have an image of you, so thank you for bearing with some of the technical matters. Gordon Rosenmeier served 10,955 days as a Minnesota legislator and also started the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Steve, what was unique about Gordon Rosenmeier among the thousands of people that have served as legislators?
Well, let me just state for the record, and this is the unanimous view of all historians and political scientists in the state of Minnesota. It's a unanimous view, an opinion that Gordon Rosenmeier, bar none, was the single most powerful, influential, knowledgeable, and respected legislator in all of Minnesota history. No legislator in Minnesota history holds a candle to Gordon Rosenmeier. And what was also unique about him was that he was visionary and held incredible power. He was considered to be more powerful than any governor at the time that he served at the time with. And he was able to accomplish many, many things for Minnesota and for this district, which I would love to talk about. He was also a big proponent of the state being in a key part of the federal system. He was very concerned about encroachment of federal power. And as a result, he made the state a working organization that served the people's interests. And he was somewhat, I would describe, as a Jeffersonian, because he believed in the value and the power of a state over, or as a co-equal with the national government. And we can talk specifically on some of the legislation that he authored for this district and for the state. One more thing I want to say about the Pollution Control Agency. He authored the bill in 1965. It became law in 1967, and it was the first pollution control agency in the nation, and it preceded the Environmental Protection Agency. When Richard Nixon became president in 1969, he used Gordon Rosenmeier's Minnesota law on the Pollution Control Agency and adapted that to the federal legislation that created the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency.
Sure. So, Steve, you actually served with Gordon Rosenmeier in the Minnesota House, didn't you?
No, I served right after him. I was elected in 72. He was defeated by Brainerd resident Winston Borden in the election of 1970. What's interesting about that defeat, and it was tragic, because the district, in effect, traded power for no power, is the fact that in losing that election, it was the first time that he had ever faced an opponent in many, many years. In the 30 years he served, and in the, I think, 8 elections that he had, he was opposed only once, and that was in 1958. And so I think that played a part in his defeat in 1970 because he was never had to campaign. He didn't know about door to door. His opponent used the abortion issue against him very unfairly, and as a result of that, he was defeated.
Well, I want to talk more about the forum, but just a couple more questions about Gordon Rosenmeier himself. You say that he's one of the most recognized and celebrated legislators in Minnesota history, but I still don't fully understand why that's the case. What was it that was so unique about him, and why is he largely recognized?
Well, he was the most powerful, and I guess what he did was he created an organization in the Senate that gave him, in effect, all the power, and yet used that power very wisely and very humbly. He served in an era of nonpartisanship. He believed in the nonpartisan legislature. We didn't have party labels at the time. And so he, in effect, was Speaker of the Senate, you might say. He was not Majority Leader, but by virtue of his chairmanship of the Senate Committee on Committees, he appointed all chairmen, all committee chairmen, all members of the conference committee, and so he was able to shape legislation the way he wanted it. And nobody knew more than he did, and as a result of that, and they trusted him. He was very, very beloved because he never lied, he never was dishonest, he gave everybody a fair shake, and so he gravitated power to himself, and yet used that power wisely. He, for example, set up not only the Pollution Control Agency but the Department of Natural Resources. He reorganized state agencies, and let me just say one more thing for the district that he did that people of Brainerd should be very happy about. But he created the Brainerd State Hospital, which at one time employed 800 people. He also gave Brainerd in Crow Wing County the district highway transportation headquarters, the DNR regional offices, and the Pollution Control Agency office, which is located here in Brainerd. So this area has many, many state employees thanks to Gordon Rosenmeier.
You know, I read something that was very interesting about him. According to the Minnesota Legislative Library, Rosenmeier himself is quoted as describing himself as a flaming liberal who served on the conservative caucus. Now, in today's political continuum and environment, that would be a very unusual statement. So can you help me understand that?
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that he said that. I think he viewed himself as visionary and progressive, but he was very opposed to great federal power. He was opposed, for example, to the Great Society legislation that he said that was creating a huge bureaucracy. And so what he did was he said, if you can have states which is closer to the people doing the functions, you have better government and you serve people better and more wisely. He just, as powerful as he was, he never ran for federal office. I mean, he believed in the state and wanted to make the state the premier institution. And Minnesota is better today because we had Gordon Rosenmeier.
Well, speaking of the state and local government, you serve as the executive director of the Rosenmeier Center for State and Local Government. And Laura, you serve on the board. Tell us, why is this work important to you? What is it about the work of the center that's important to you?
I've been a board member since 2012. Didn't know anyone on the board at the time, maybe one person, but I was very much taken by the mission that Gordon Rosenmeier established for this organization, which is to educate the citizenry on key issues upon which they might be called to make important decisions. So educating the citizenry, promoting people's involvement in their communities, in their state, in things that affect them, that affect the common good, this really rang true with me, and I've enjoyed being on the board and organizing a number of forums, which we discuss and sign on to various forums that members might have. And it's been a really pleasurable and an honor to be a part of the Rosenmeier Center.
Well, thank you for your public service, Laura.
Mhm.
I know you're a very civically engaged person. Tell us a little bit about some of the topics that you've tackled through the actual forum, and how do you curate that content? Who's responsible for that?
Any board member can submit an idea for a forum
Okay.
and lay it out, what the concept is, who might the presenters be. One thing that's important in this organization, since it's nonpartisan, is that our issues have to present both or all sides of any issue. It can't be politically motivated or one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
And areas of interest that I have had are healthcare. So in 2012, I organized a forum on cost efficiencies and accountability in Minnesota's healthcare delivery system. That was followed in 2019 with a forum on the role of government in healthcare. That featured State Senator John Marty and former U.S. Senator David Dernberger. So any of us can lay these ideas out. Then the board, we discuss it, the board votes on it, whether to go ahead with it. My first year in 2012, I also chaired a forum on renewable energy and local economies, another issue that is dear to my heart. So we had the future of renewable energy in Minnesota, which discussed Minnesota's 2025 renewable energy standard and how are we doing with that. That was followed in 2014 by a forum given by Winona LaDuke.
Mm-hmm.
And her forum was energy and local food policies for a sustainable lakes area region. And she was excellent in fleshing out what she saw. She's a Harvard-trained, MIT-trained rural development economist. So she had very good ideas of how we can create better, more viable economies in our region and in our localities.
So when
So
board
those are some of the
members,
early ones.
okay, so when board members present these ideas, are there any topics that are considered too controversial? Have you actually scuttled any of the proposed topics? What's too controversial for the Rosenmeier Forum?
Probably anything that would be seen as it could only be one-sided or far too politically motivated.
Mm-hmm.
I did do a copper nickel mining forum in 2014, and we discussed that quite a bit because at that time it was just starting to be learned about as an issue
Mm-hmm.
that now has gained in great, has got quite a bit of rancor surrounding that. And in fact, this past spring, I had organized a second forum on, is Minnesota ready for copper nickel mining? And this was to have been this spring, but it got canceled, of course, along with all public events in the coronavirus pandemic. But that it aroused quite a bit of discussion on the board because even though I think it's gone past being partisan, it is still widely seen as a politically galvanizing subject.
So is it challenging to ensure that you have equal time and representations for both sides? We, of course, have the same policy here at Lakeland Public TV, and I'm curious, how do you achieve that? How do you ensure that a topic such as copper nickel mining near the boundary waters actually has equal representation for both sides, if you will?
Well, for example, the first one I did in 2014 was, it had Dr. George Hudak and Dr. Fosnacht from the Natural Resources Research Institute, which is housed at the University of Minnesota Duluth.
Mm-hmm.
So they do a lot of the research on minerals and mining in that area. Up against them was Katherine Hoffman, who is the executive director of the MCEA, the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And she had read the whole 2,000-page EIS. So when I do a forum, and anybody who would do a forum, you would try to get the very best presenters for both sides of an issue, equally qualified.
So, Mr. Wenzel, are these debates or are they opportunities for both sides to simply present their position, or is there actually a heated exchange between the two sides?
Seldom have we, that I can recall, Laura can probably correct me on this, but that we've had heated exchanges. But there is a debate, not a debate, but a discussion of opposing views, but it's more of a discussion than a debate, I would say. It's an examination of the issues and the positions that both sides hold. One of the things that we do insist upon, as Laura mentioned, was the fact that we are nonpartisan in the tradition of Gordon Rosenmeier. Gordon Rosenmeier, if everyone should remember the fact that he was probably the most nonpartisan person there was. He didn't belong, he said, to a political party. He was not a Republican or a Democrat, and he used to brag over the fact that he never once attended a precinct caucus. So the other feature, and Laura can also affirm this, that we examine issues that are primarily state issues, not federal. I mean, a federal issue doesn't really have an opportunity to be presented unless it impacts on the state of Minnesota. Laura, can you elaborate on that point?
Well, we do, the issues do need to have an impact on our state and our communities. So for example, we've had Thomas Hansen, former Foreign Service Officer with the U.S. Department of State. He has given a forum every year since 2014, and as always, his specialty, of course, is U.S. foreign policy and how it's going to impinge on, for example, the 2016 elections, right before the 2018 elections. In 2017, it was U.S. foreign policy in the Trump era. Now he will be coming back this November, we hope, and do a forum just following the 2020 elections. So he relates it to U.S. and foreign policy, but of course, everything affects everything. All federal issues do come down to affecting us at the state and local levels as well. But yes, Steve is right that we try to have it very distinctly refer to something that's happening in the state. We did 2 forums on oil pipelines, the Enbridge Line 3, and just discussing the efficacy of that subject. We've done 2 on water issues. What is clean water worth in northern Minnesota communities?
Absolutely. Well, I'm really interested when you bring up pipelines, for example, it makes me wonder if there's an opportunity for the audience to actually be involved. And I'm also curious, who is the audience? Who's likely to attend one of the forums? Of course, this is pre-COVID-19 when you were having forums in person. Who was a typical attendee for a forum?
It runs a wide gamut of community, people who typically might be very interested in this or that topic. We just did this past year one on chronic wasting disease. We had an entirely different audience for that topic. In water issues, the pipeline, the copper nickel mining. We've done one on Judge Miles Lord. We've done Lori Sturdivant of the Star Tribune and former U.S. Senator David Durenberger did a forum last year on their book, When Republicans Were Progressive. So that drew a very good audience. Very many different people. Some of the same people come to almost every forum, but we will always have new people attending those.
What's the typical age group?
Probably older, except now, Steve, you can speak to this. We hold some of our forums at noon as well as in the evening so that college students can attend.
Yes,
and that's been very successful.
Yes, we've had many college students attend, and I always encourage my political science students here to attend the forum. And when Mr. Hansen on foreign policy, who is a national expert in foreign policy, speaks, he comes, we sponsor him solely. We don't have a discussion with somebody else with Mr. Hansen. Is that right, Laura?
Yes. Once in a while we'll have a solo presenter if it's more of an all-encompassing viewpoint that doesn't necessarily hearken to a strict political divide.
Or an agenda, sure. Representative Wenzel, I was going to ask you more about your role at Central Lakes College. So you're an instructor of political science, and the Rosenmeier Center for State and Local Government, of course, is based at Central Lakes College. So where does the college end and the center begin, rather? Is the center part of Central Lakes College? And if so, is it publicly funded?
No, it is not publicly funded. I call it quasi-public-private, nonprofit, uh, quasi-public, because we are affiliated and tied to the college. And
Mm-hmm.
the forum, the center was started in 1988 with the permission of Gordon Rosenmeier, who made a decision, Mr. Edens, to donate all of his papers and memorabilia and books to Central Lakes College. So we have a Rosenmeier room in the Central Lakes College library. Sally Inney, then president of the college, was the one who was instrumental. It was her idea, not mine. I was on the adjunct faculty at the time and in the legislature, but when she mentioned it to me, I said, that's a great idea. And she said she was going to go see Gordon, which she did, and had a visit with him in Little Falls. And he of course, gave the green light he thought that would be good. And I might mention one more thing that I failed to mention in his legislation. Gordon Rosenmeier is the father of the Minnesota Community College system in Minnesota. He created it. And in the early 40s, and then modernized it to what it is today in the higher education system. He also chaired the Finance Committee of Higher Education when he was in the legislature, as well as the Judiciary Committee and the Committee on Committees. So he had a unique interest in educational institutions, including the University of Minnesota. And so that's about what I can tell you, how this organization, the Center for
Sure.
State and Local Government, the Gordon Rosenmeier Center for State and Local Government, got started in 1988, and we've evolved, we've improved. We have a good, interested board of people from varied backgrounds.
So it seems
and the forums have been just great.
it seems very appropriate then that the center is based at Central Lakes College. So you're telling me that he is almost single-handedly responsible for starting community colleges in Minnesota.
Well, let me just make one
Briefly.
amendment to that. His father was the state senator who died in office.
Representative
He
Wendy?
authored the first. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Yeah, his father was Christian Rosenmeier and was 12 years in the Minnesota State Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And he authored the first community college bill that created, I think, Brainerd Community College in 1938. Probably it was done in the 37 legislature in 1938. Gordon Rosenmeier took it from there
Mm-hmm.
and created a modern community college system, which is considered one of the finest, most advanced community college system of any state in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And having been here as long as I have for 30 years, first many years on the adjunct faculty, now as a full-time instructor of political science here at Central Lakes College, I can say that, it is very appropriate that this was one of Sally Inney's best ideas, who really was a great president when she was the longest serving president of Central Lakes College, served, I believe, 20 years as our president here.
Interesting. Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that we talk about the upcoming forum topics. So, of course, with COVID-19, I'm sure it's challenging to schedule the next in-person forum. So can you tell us a little bit about what we have to look forward to, what the format's going to be, Laura, and what are some of the next topics that you're going to tackle?
We don't know when we'll be meeting again, of course, under the circumstances. I would like to continue on with the forum, Is Minnesota Ready for Copper Nickel Mining? I would love to bring that to fruition. We've had Paul Douglas speak on climate change, which is it was a solo presentation, just laying out the facts of what he was finding as a nationally respected meteorologist.
Sure.
So I think topics like climate change, food policy issues, I think are something that I have been keenly studying for years, our agricultural systems and what is happening to our water and soil. So those are issues that I feel very strongly about.
So is there a forum on the calendar right now, and how are you going to adapt to a post-COVID era? Will these be offered still digitally, or what's your plan?
There are no forums scheduled. We don't meet in the summer. So this forum we were to have had in March or April, and we haven't met, of course, since March. So we need to figure this out, how we are going to proceed from here and continue on with having forums. Steve, maybe you have discussed that? I'm not sure.
We always have our annual meeting in June, and because of the restrictions, it's unlikely that we will have a June meeting, which is our final meeting until September. And really, until this crisis is over, I don't foresee any forums until we have resolved the COVID-19.
Well,
COVID-19.
I'm sorry to hear that. It's difficult for all of us to adapt, of course, but let's just assume that you are able to have in-person forums again. I just want to talk briefly about some nuts and bolts. If I were to attend, what does it cost me as an individual to partake in one of these discussions?
It's
free. It's open to the public.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't charge at all.
Good.
And
Good. And then just
so,
two final questions. One for you, Laura. Why would a speaker want to come to the forum? What's of interest to the speakers? I mean, it's obviously not easy to get a Mr. Paul Douglas, for example, or Senator Durenberger. So how do you motivate speakers to participate briefly?
I inform them about the history and the mission of the Rosenmeier Center. I've been told we get very excellent speakers. They never hesitate to come here because of that. And several have said there is no organization like this anywhere that they know of. There's nothing quite like the Rosenmeier Center. We have an endowment so that we can then pay honorarium and travel expenses, for example. So that has been very helpful to us. It's been gratifying to hear that the Rosenmeier Center has been so well received. I would like to see the Rosenmeier Center be a household word in the whole Brainerd Lakes area.
Mm-hmm. Well, Representative Wenzel, we've only got about 30 seconds left. I want to ask you, in closing here, how do you see Gordon Rosenmeier's legacy in the impact of the forum? Very briefly.
Well, I just think that his legacy was so great, and it is this current generation of young people should know that such a gifted public servant existed who served uniquely the public interest of the state of Minnesota, and so that his legacy is never, ever forgotten. That we can have nonpartisan government, particularly in an age of polarization and extreme partisanship today. The memory and legacy of Gordon Rosenmeier looms large if we could keep people to keep that old perspective in mind.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there, Representative Wenzel. That was a great closing comment. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the public service work that both of you do. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed it very much.
Good.
Bye.
And thank all of you for joining us once again. You can learn more about the Rosenmeier Forum at the Central Lakes College website and also on their Facebook page. I'm Jason Edens, your host of Lakeland Currents. Be kind and be well. We'll see you next time.